The God of Humanity. A story by user Tashdacat. I am Dreknar Torgul, first son of the God Archon, demigod of the Nevray Empire, conqueror of more than 47,000 worlds. And as I write these words, I have never been more afraid. Fear is not an emotion that I have experienced before. I'm divine for Archon's sake. While the other gods might play at science, or attempt to lead their people in some foolish idea of enlightenment, the Nevrayan people have always stood tall as conquerors. We are born and bred for battle, unafraid of injury or death, and completely tied to the God Archon's will. We are conquerors, warlords, tyrants. We have enslaved dozens of species, forcing their gods to submit to the Archon's will. When the Lelgirian Empire disappeared, it was us who conquered their worlds, expanding our empire to almost a third of the entire galaxy. I have faced battle 1,000 times over, and led charges that crippled enemy lines in the face of overwhelming force. And a single meeting has instilled in me a fear like nothing else. Nothing can stop it, or even lessen it, and I have spent every moment of the last several weeks in absolute terror. But I should start from the beginning. A region of space in the middle of the galactic arms had long since eluded our scanners and survey probes. It was a massive region, too, seemingly with no known scientific reason for why it couldn't be penetrated. A few months back, frustrated and tired of the unknown, the Triskelion god personally led an exploration fleet into the void. He came back a week later. His whole fleet fused into a single twisting mass of metal and plastic, gibbering and screaming about unknown horrors that had apparently killed his entire crew. We couldn't even figure out how the ship had gotten out. It had simply appeared before the Triskelion homeworld of Tarn, blasting out their god's insane ramblings on every frequency. We had to cut through the ships to get to him, because the wrecks had folded in on each other so much and become so fused that it was like a colossal maze. The God Archon himself went to see the insane creature, locked to a wall and screaming about some entity they had encountered. I went with him at his request, and to see a god brought so low was indescribable. Upon sighting the God Archon, the raving Triskelion began screaming, trying to wrench itself free from the restraints as he screeched out the same words again and again. "The Lelgirians know! Ask them! Ask the Lelgirians and they'll give you the answers you need!" The God Archon exited the meeting looking grim, and immediately ordered me to take a full combat fleet into that region. "No matter what the entity is, you must find it and kill it. I want the body brought to me personally." That was his directive, and we leapt to obey. Months of preparation later, we stood a single system away. Before us stood the unknown, everything inside a complete mystery. 78,000 beings across 50 ships of multiple classes stood at the precipice, and all dived into the black without a second thought. I didn't know what I was expecting, but to be greeted with nothing but a seemingly normal solar system certainly wasn't it. We dutifully began surveying planets, sending science teams escorted by experienced combat personnel to any anomalies we found. Nothing. Second system, nothing. Third, fourth, fifth, all nothing. By the sixth, I was both confused and annoyed, until we landed on the 8th planet. It was barren, desolate, completely void of life or even an atmosphere. The anomaly we found was nothing more than some unusually resonant minerals that were bouncing back solar radiation. But when gearing up to leave the planet, the away team saw something. A figure, tall but cloaked in black robes. They were just standing there, without an obvious environmental protection suit on. They didn't move or speak or do anything. They just watched. At first, we dismissed these claims. It was ludicrous, after all, pure fallacy. But they kept appearing. Again and again. When we landed on a jungle world 3 systems later, we saw one leaning against a tree. A team sent to a pockmarked moon, more than a dozen jumps into the region, saw a group of them watching from the tip of the crater they just went down. When we sent a group into an asteroid belt, the crew began screaming in fear, as dozens of them appeared around their ship, floating in the void. Soon we began debating whether to start shooting on sight. But these beings, they never tried to harm us. They just kept staring. Always they kept staring, sometimes even with heads cocked slightly, as if trying to puzzle out what we were. I began to wonder if this is why the Triskelion god had gone insane. To be constantly watched was unnerving. While the Navrayan crew were doing okay with it, the other species weren't as immune to fear as we were. As we thought we were. Soon reports of them started to manifest from our ships as well. Figures hidden in darkened rooms, or moving through dimly lit corridors. A night watchman would pan a camera around to find one standing on the hull, just staring into the camera. A chef waking up early swore she saw one standing over her bed, before it disappeared. The crew began to panic, began to demand we leave this accursed place. I put my foot down, ordering executions to keep them in line. But soon enough, even that wasn't enough. As soon as the first Navrayan soldier reported feeling terror upon sighting one of these figures, word of it spread through the ship like wildfire. By this time, we were almost 50 jumps in, and we were beginning to receive scattered radio signals, but they were distorted by time and distance. The fear ran through everyone, and even my own captains were questioning how much longer we could go on. I shot one in front of the others, putting 2 slugs into his corpse for good measure. They got the message. No retreat, no surrender. Nothing would stop us. I was the first son of the God Archon himself, and I would complete my mission if I had to personally kill every cowardly subordinate I had. I ordered the radio signal located, and as we jumped towards the center point of the unknown region, they started to get clearer. It was in a language we couldn't identify. Soon, radio signals became fewer, as a visual medium became the norm, and even that soon died off in favor of bursts of data. Soon, we had pinpointed the system the constant stream of information was coming from, and I ordered us to jump into it. We had long since gone past the point of no return, and each jump forward cost us manpower as hysterical and terrified crew members had to be executed or imprisoned. When the FTL drive fired this time, however, we emerged into a void. There was nothing. No stars, no lights, no planets. Nothing. Just endless oppressive black. I turned to my helmsman, demanding to know what had occurred, only to find he wasn't there. No one was there. Machines beeped as radars searched, but no one was at their posts, not even in the room. Puzzled, I left the bridge, stalking through the halls of the flagship, bellowing for the crew. How dare they? They must have done something to my ship to ensure I would be trapped here, so they could leave. There was no other explanation. The cowards, the pathetic fools. How dare they leave me here as they returned home? After hours of searching and finding no one, I heard a strange noise off in the distance, like water being poured into a vessel. I followed it, weaving in and out of the corridors and rooms before the familiar passages of the hallways near the command bridge returned. By this point, the water was no longer being poured, but bubbling softly. The moment I entered the bridge, I stopped dead in my tracks, my blood turning to ice. Dozens of black hooded figures were scattered through the room. Some sat at chairs that had been occupied by my crew. Others leant against walls or consoles, or just stood in the aisles, staring at me. Ah, good. You've arrived just in time. Please, sit. The figures snapped their heads around to stare at someone else, and as I followed their gaze, I saw who they were watching. A long-haired figure stood near a table, and 2 cushioned chairs that had been set up in front of the viewport, looking out over the infinite blackness we had become trapped in. On top of the table was a small glass vessel, ovoid in shape, with a handle and spout that had been filled with a greenish liquid, which was the source of the soft bubbling noise. Next to it were 2 smaller vessels, made of glass that had a swirling floral pattern within the structure itself. Please sit, the figure repeated, gesturing towards the chair opposite where they stood. They were wearing clothes different from the others, soft robes of white and purple. I moved cautiously, fear beginning to seep its way into my own being as well. The moment I stepped into the room, the black-robed figures' heads whirled to stare at me once more, moving their faces slowly to observe as I walked towards the figure. Coming to a stop in front of them, I spoke, the confidence in my voice noticeably artificial, as I desperately tried to wrestle the fear from my very core. Who are you? Where have you taken me? The figure just blinked, then exhaled sharply. I was told you were a bit egotistical, but to not even ask about your crew after searching for them for so long? Were you just wandering to wander? The note of amusement in their voice irritated me, so I snapped back harshly. something I now regret doing. My crew are nothing more than cowardly fools who left me to whatever fate you have in store for me so they could flee back home. If they were here, I'd execute every one of them." The figure just laughed at that. "My dear child, your crew hasn't left you, not at all. They're right here with us. Take a look." They extended an arm outwards to the viewport in front of us, and I turned my head to see what they were talking about. By all the gods of this universe and any other, I wish I hadn't. The face of my helmsman stared back at me, eyes sunken and hollow, and face contorted into a scream. As my eyes darted away from the horrifying sight, they landed on my chief engineer, then the commander of my lead fighter squadron. Thousands of faces stared back at me, all stark white, sunken-eyed, and screaming in terror, all staring directly at me, rows upon rows of them, all hanging in the void outside. I felt my legs buckle underneath me as I stared, felt strong hands prevent me from falling, and gently placed my limp form into the chair beside me. I heard liquid pour, and my hands were taken by someone and wrapped around something warm. But I couldn't break their gaze. My eyes darted from one pair of screaming, sunken eyes to the next. I don't know how long I kept looking until I finally found the strength to speak. "How... Not even our god could have done something like this? Yes, I've heard that before." When their voice came to me, I found the will to look away. Instead, I turned my terrified face to theirs, staring into those kind old eyes. They smiled back at me, a kindly expression to go with their kind tone. "Don't worry, child. We have plenty of time for questions. Just drink up now. It will help calm you." They sat with their hands holding onto one of the glass vessels, and I looked down and realized I too was holding one. The greenish-tinged liquid stared back at me, gently rocking back and forth in the glass as my hands shook. I didn't know what it was. Poison? Some kind of elixir? I moved my gaze back to them, but before I could pose my question, it was answered. "Spearmint and chamomile, freshly picked, and left in hot water to steep alongside a specific form of another plant called tea. It's regularly consumed by our people, and I made sure it was compatible with Navrayan physiology before giving it to you. Just drink it, my child. You'll feel better in a moment." I bade my arms carry the vessel to my mouth, and surprisingly, they did so. I sipped the liquid at first. It was pleasantly warm, with a cooling taste to it. I took another sip, and another, then started gulping it down. I finished the drink and exhaled, realizing I had not done so in several moments. Over the next few seconds, I felt calmer. As they had said, drinking it did make me feel better. I placed the glass vessel on the table next to me, and heard water pouring again. I looked over to see they were pouring me more of this drink from the larger ovoid glass vessel in the middle of the table. I took the vessel when they were done. The warmth ran through my hands into my veins, and somehow my whole body felt warmer, despite the cool atmospheric conditions kept by the ship. At last I felt I could speak. "Are they..." "No, I don't kill unless I need to." There was a note of offense in their voice, and I flinched, but they clearly noticed, and when they spoke, their tone was regretful. "Sorry, I dislike wanton killing, and we have been observing your journey. Now it was my turn to feel regret. I looked out on the masses of beings hovering in the void outside. Where are we? Your FTL drive works by folding space into a shorter distance. We're simply within that tunnel, but your motion has been suspended. Trapped in an artificial tunnel between points in real space would be how to best describe it." How? Not even the God Archon could do such a feat. That creep of dread came back. If they were capable of performing a feat such as this, what else could they do? And why did they do all this just to talk with me? "You mean to tell me you are still unaware of the nature of the gods? How their powers are made, defined, and most importantly, limited?" A god's power is without limit." The words came to be unbidden. Wrote learning from my education at the feet of my father. Is it? All of a sudden, I no longer knew. Those two words shook me to my core, as I looked out and realized how truly insane the situation was. There was no way the God Archon could do something like this. If he had, he would have done so countless times. We would have brought the galaxy under his rule if he could do this. They spoke again, explaining calmly as if to a young child. Then again, I suppose I was a child, to a being of such power. A god's power is defined by the beliefs of their worshippers and creators, as well as the culture they come from. For instance, you view your god archon as a mighty warlord, leading you into battle to always achieve victory, and so he has become such to you. The Umlorian, however, are a species that highly prize craftsmen, and believe that the creation of items was as close as you could get to divinity, and so their god is a master craftsman, able to create incredible works and to guide their species in doing so themselves. So on and so on, onwards and onwards, for every species in this great universe of ours. I was silent for a long time, processing this. It immediately explained the differing natures and powers each of the gods had demonstrated. It went against everything I was taught, but was in line with everything I had seen and experienced. The god Archon wasn't a genius researcher like Triskelion, nor was he a wise sage like the god of the Formorant. He was a warlord who led us in battle, achieved victory after victory, but he couldn't engineer a water system or teach us how to produce solar arrays to get power. My newfound realization must have registered on my body language, because the being beside me spoke. You're starting to understand what I'm talking about then. Good. So, what are you then? Why are you so powerful? The being smiled once more, seemingly having anticipated this. There is a very specific kind of god that is born sometimes. We are not born of a desire, or a wish to become something, but instead born of fear. In my case, fear of the unknown. The unknown? I don't understand. All beings fear the unknown to some degree, right? Maybe so, but not to the same extent they fear other things. Usually as they develop a society, their fear of the unknown falls to the wayside, replaced with fear of much more tangible things. Disease, war, bankruptcy, death. But for humans, fear of the unknown never went away. Humans? Is that your species? Yes, we're not much to look at compared to some other species, but I like to think we have a certain charm about us. So how does this make you so powerful? Consider what you believed an hour ago, about your father, the god Archon. Then consider what I have told you just now. It'll take a few moments, but you'll work out what I mean. I did as instructed, and thought. I thought, and eventually something clicked in my head. We put limits on the god Archon, because of what we were afraid of, and how we developed. Humans must not have put limits on you at all, and so you just grew in power. I looked over to the being, to see them watching me with a kind smile. They inclined their head before turning their gaze to me. You got it in one. Humans' fear of the unknown created me, but if I reveal myself to them, they would just stop being afraid. Your god Archon needs your species to want to fight, want to conquer. Without the innate desire, he'd weaken and eventually fade. Such is the same for me. If the humans I watch over ever stopped being afraid, then I would no longer exist. So you're able to do anything you need in order to protect them? Yes, if I can imagine it or think it up, I can do it. This is also why I have raised others to my level, to provide a greater imagination to draw from to solve problems. They gestured to the assembled group of black-cloaked beings, watching the conversation unfold. The nearest ones to me had barely visible smiles under their hoods. You must know that when I return to the god Archon, he's going to come here himself. He commanded me to bring your corpse back to him, and with my failure, he's going to assemble the largest fleet this galaxy has ever seen, and come here. What will you do then? Can you even kill another god? They were silent for a long time, before exhaling deeply. With a sweeping motion, they gestured out into the void beyond the viewport. They spoke but 2 words, and they were heavy with regret and sorrow. Ask them. I looked and almost screamed in horror. I beheld the face of the Lelgerian god, the rival warlord to my own god Archon, conqueror of a huge chunk of the galaxy that we had since conquered ourselves, after the entire species had disappeared overnight. My eyes slowly moved away from her face, and I beheld the Lelgerian people. All of them. Billions of people, and here they were, all suspended in this void of the human god's creation, caught on the precipice between life and death, doomed to spend eternity screaming endlessly in an uncaring black abyss. I whirled around to face the being before me, not even aware I had risen and moved to stand before the viewport. As my hands tensed up, I felt the glass of hot liquid give way, cracking to pieces, but I didn't feel the boiling water splash me. nor the shards pierce my flesh. All I felt was terror, pure terror at the being sitting calmly in front of me. This god of a people we never knew existed. This god of a people we never knew existed. This monster who'd caused an entire species to vanish from the face of the galaxy, and who would do so again to protect those who had no clue of their existence. And here I was, face to face with them, mere steps away from a being who could blink me from existence with a mere thought. No, not a being, dozens of them. I slowly panned my eyes over the assembled crowd, over the dozens of black-robed figures who filled the room and who had done nothing so far but watch and wait. All of them, they had said, were like them, as purposeful, as capable, as powerful. The being stood from the chair and began to walk slowly towards me. I backed up as fast as I could until my back slammed against the reinforced glass of the viewport behind me. Still, they came forward, laying a hand gently on my shoulder as I stared into their eyes, my body filling with an indescribable and complete horror. They spoke with the same kind tone they had spoken with almost the entire time we'd been together. But there was an iron behind it now, a rod of steel behind the calm facade that spoke of eons of watching the void for threats and making them disappear. Shh, it's okay. I'm not going to do anything to you. I'll return you, your crew, and your fleet to your homeworld. You can tell your God Archon of us, of what happens to those who threaten us. Humans and humanity have a protector, and I will go to any lengths needed to protect them. Do you understand? I don't know what I said. I don't know how I could have even spoken, but the words that tumbled out of me seemed to placate them. They inclined their head again and patted me on the shoulder. And then suddenly, they were gone. Their chairs, their tables, their vessels, their fellow gods scattered throughout the room. All were gone. In their place was the terrified and curious faces of my crew. Faces I had seen screaming in the void not long ago. Faces that were turned to me standing with my back to the viewport, trembling in pure terror, and clutching a broken glass vessel of burning hot liquid. I turned slowly, not wanting to see what I knew would be out there, not wanting to believe any of what I experienced was real, while knowing in my heart of hearts that it was. Outside was our homeworld. The beautiful jewel of our empire had never looked so terrifying. Behind me, the crew were muttering, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Soon after, I was dragged before the God Archon as a failure. The first son himself branded a coward and a traitor, before I had even gotten a chance to speak. I described in detail what I had seen, the conclusions I had come to, the questions I'd had answered. Every detail that burned itself into my memory, that had etched themselves onto my very soul, I divulged. The God Archon called me an idiot, and declared me as insane as the Trexkelian god. He commanded my execution, and bade me write the final words I would ever scribe. So they had a permanent record of my failure. But as I write this, I'm laughing. It started slowly, but soon grew manic after I heard the guards talking. The God Archon was leading every fleet we had into that black abyss. I know what will happen. I know what has to happen. It might only take a few days since they have the navigation data we acquired, but it'll happen even if they take the same time we took to get there. And I will have the last laugh. Failure, he called me. Coward, they cried. I will be killed by the hand of the God Archon himself before he leaves. I will not be a part of the Nevraean Empire when they encounter the human god. I will die with a smile on my face, laughing in the face of my killers, as I know for certain what fate awaits them. The human god punishes all who trespass on their domain with malice in their hearts. And unlike all of them, unlike all my people, I will not be left screaming into the void for eternity as punishment for my hubris. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story and join the Discord if you like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, but remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.